Now, one of the most famous tales in history is that of the tragic young lovers Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare's classic play has inspired artists for centuries, spinning out into versions like Baz Luhrmann's modern movie take in the 90s or the iconic musical West Side Story. Its latest incarnation is a reworking of the ballet version of Romeo and Juliet that's on now at the Châtelet Theatre in Paris. It's from world-renowned director and choreographer Matthew Bourne, who joins me now on the set. Matthew, welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So you've been creating dance for over 30 years, some incredible reworkings we've seen in the past of Swan Lake or the Carman, which is your take on Carmen. Now, I read that you had said that you would never do Romeo and Juliet. What changed your mind?
Well, I thought it was a bit overdone, in all the different mediums that it's being incarnated, as you said. I think the thing that changed my mind was to cast it really young and go on a real talent search for young dancers. That inspired me, and I thought I really want to listen to young people and what was important to them. But that got me going, got my mind with the juices flowing, and I think we've come up with something which is fairly unique, not like any other Romeo and Juliet.
It certainly is, and we're going to talk a lot more about it. But first, let's just let the pictures speak for themselves. Matthew Bourne's Romeo and Juliet on now at the Châtelet Theatre in Paris. Matthew, we saw a bit there. Your Romeo and Juliet, of course, a bit different. It's your own take. It takes place in Verona, but not the town of Verona, something called the Verona Institute, which is sort of a mental institution or a very strict boarding school. Tell us a bit about what was your idea there.
Well, it's interesting because I try not to dictate to the audience what they're seeing. It's set in an institution, as you rightly say, the Verona Institute. It could be a prison, it could be a hospital, it could be many things. I don't mind what the audience feel from watching that, but it's a story told. It gives you a Romeo and Juliet type story, but it tells its own story with a few surprises along the way. And we all know how it ends, rather tragically, but it's how we get there, which is very different. And I kind of approach dance in the way you would approach going to see a great film. You don't want to know what the ending is before you see it. So I try and have a few surprises plot-wise along the way and create a story which is going to hopefully surprise people in a good way.
It's interesting. Many classical characters remain, obviously, Romeo, Juliet. The names are the same, Tybalt. But you've tweaked some of these characters. So tell us about the choices in the tweaking of those characters.
Well, for Romeo and Juliet, I've made them, they're two young people who are incarcerated in this institution. You don't really know, again, why. But Juliet has a history of abuse in her story before she meets Romeo. Romeo you see him brought to the institute by rather uncaring parents, sort of paid to be kept there. Maybe he's an embarrassment in some way. He's an innocent in a way, quite a quirky young guy. So they're very different. When they meet, they're already quite a lot about them as characters. But we also have Tybalt, who's a guard in this place. He's the sort of villain of the piece. We have other characters from the Shakespeare. Mercutio has a boyfriend in our piece called Balthazar. We try and represent what a lot of is important to a lot of young people by the inmates of this institute as well.
And that's something that works really well when you watch the piece, because you're dealing with a lot of themes you don't usually see in dance, mental health, homophobia, bullying. What were the challenges of bringing that into the show?
Very challenging, actually, because I felt they were subjects that couldn't be taken lightly. We had to approach them in a serious way and discuss them and make sure we were representing those stories in the right way. When you're dealing with those subject matters, you can't just use them in a flippant way. And I think Juliet's story in particular, which touches on her abuse that you're aware of early on in the piece, comes back to haunt her in a way. Like it does with it's not something that just leaves you, it's there forever. And I think that's an important part of our plot and very important to approach it with a seriousness that it deserves.
And what's so great with your dancers as well, they're all wonderful actors.
Yes.
When you're auditioning, when you're creating the company, how much do you look for the acting piece of the puzzle?
Well, they're not trained actors, they're trained dancers. That's the first skill that I need from them. And I look for dancers who are very generous with wanting to express. It's not acting in a sense in auditions. It's about them wanting to give to an audience. That's the beginning of acting in a way, the beginning of wanting to tell a story. They kind of learn from each other. This piece in particular, because it's set in the modern day, it's about young people. They have the chance to maybe represent themselves a little bit. They can call upon their own experiences to create characters, which is very useful if you're not, it's not your first skill.
You also get a feeling of the ensemble because even the main roles are played by 3 different dancers throughout the course of the show. Tell me about that process of working together as a real troupe without stars.
Yeah, they're a wonderful company and they truly are a company and a family. It's important to keep the show alive. So the casting, as you say, every night is a different mix of people. The Romeos and Juliets change. Everyone changes around. We do a lot of performances. We do a lot of touring. It keeps people on their toes. It keeps the show alive because you never quite know who you're going to dance with that night. It doesn't settle into anything. And that's what keeps it fresh, I think.
And let's talk about the score. Many people are familiar with that score we heard from Prokofiev. You work with Terry Davies. You've worked with him for many, many years. How does the process work? Does he tweak up the score first and then you choreograph or vice versa?
It's a bit of both. With this one in particular, Prokofiev, for me, it's such great dance music. It's great storytelling music. And for me, it's like the script, much more so than Shakespeare in this situation. The Prokofiev is the script. And so I listen to it with Terry and try and find new ideas, new feelings, new emotions in that music. And it's very much guided by the music. I think it's one of the best scores ever written. It's written in the 1930s. It sounds like a contemporary film score sometimes, But we were able to do a new orchestration for this version with 17 musicians. So it's got a much more visceral, raw feeling to it.
I was mentioning before one of the incarnations of Romeo and Juliet that many people know in the theater world, West Side Story. In this picture that we see behind you, it is reminiscent of that dance at the gym. Was that going through your mind?
Always. West Side Story has been a lifelong inspiration to me. I've always loved the piece. And we were just in Los Angeles, I should tell you, with the piece. And the leader of the Jets, Russ Tamblyn, and the leader of the Sharks, George Chakiris, both nearly 90 years old. Both came to see the show, which was a thrill for the company, a thrill for me. But that show has gone through my life as an inspiration, so it's always going to be in there a little bit. You've
also worked many years in Broadway on the West End, several productions with Cameron Mackintosh. Yes. The West End, then Broadway, then the Châtelet Theatre in Paris. How does it compare? How are French audiences?
Châtelet is it's such a cultural city, France. I get a bit nervous actually about coming to a new place. We haven't been here for quite a long time. The show's very, as you say, very different, very alternative take on this. So I get quite nervous. I think it's the French audience is very discerning. But it's gone down well so far. I feel very happy. The concentration is incredible with the audience. That you can hear a pin drop. It feels great. So I'm very happy that the French audiences are taking to this new version.
Matthew, you've been touring with this Romeo and Juliet since 2019. What's your next project? Have you chosen another old story, old book, old movie to reinvent?
I haven't got a new one as such coming up. We're reviving My Swan Lake, its 30th anniversary production later this year, the one with the male swans. And I do love bringing shows back. I always feel you can improve on them. I know many choreographers and directors don't like reviving work. I've always loved it. I always feel you can do better. And so that's as exciting for me as doing a new show.
Well, we're looking forward to it. In the meantime, we can catch Romeo and Juliet by Matthew Bourne at the Châtelet Theatre in Paris. It's on through March 28th. Thank you so much for coming in to see us.
Thank you very much.